And if you can have an attitude of gratitude and bringing that benevolence, then everything postures around you to deliver it. And right now, I think it's time to deliver a meditation and a channel. Mm-hmm. So I invite you to close your eyes and to just suspend time in this moment so that you are now giving yourself some self-care. And that self-care right now in this moment is enhancing that connection you have with the soul energy part of you. We're about to receive a message from Cryon. And Cryon is a group, an entourage that is entangled with our soul. So many of you say, I feel Cryon is speaking to me personally, directly. How can that be when there are many of you? And this is where Cryon says, the many are the one. And so in this oneness of the many, let us now receive the message from Cryon.
Winter is coming. Really. Greetings, dear ones. I'm Cryon of Magnetic Service. What does that mean? And what does the change in the climate mean to you? And which direction is it going? All right. This year was officially measured as one of the most warm years on the planet for those who measure, and that would not say anything about winter coming, now would it? So for many years, when we talk about the change of Gaia, for many years, I have given you a message that to most is laughable. For those who would watch this right now, what is Cryon going to say that would ever justify the idea that it's going to get colder? Dear ones, we talk about change. This is the fourth in a series of 4 about the changes going on the planet. This one specifically is about your weather. It's about Gaia. It's about the beauty of the way life is sustained and created. Now, what has that got to do with the weather? Let me tell you. The planet sustains life, your life, the foods in your ocean, all of the things that you need to survive, and it does it with one attribute, and it's called cycles. And the cycles are often the cycles of cold and warm. Humanity has not been here very long, not really. When you take a look at the age of the planet, the gyrations the planet has been through in order to be in its calm state now, humanity just arrived. If you had a clock of 12 hours, and it all represented the lifetime, I would say, of the planet, well, humanity got here about 3 seconds ago. And so you really have not had time to experience many cycles. This planet's cycles are cycles within cycles. There's large ones, there are intermediate ones, and there are short ones. And those who start to study the cycles do it the best way they can by going into that which perhaps is the tree rings, the ice cores, anything that will show them the geology that happened on the planet and when it happened. And these are literally the tools one would need to see what has happened in the past with the weather of Gaia. Dear ones, I'm here to say yet again, there is a weather pattern that this planet has seen before. And it's not necessarily a pattern that you have been measuring since you've only been measuring for a few years. Humanity may have been here for thousands of years, but those who keep records, that hasn't been very long. So you sit here thinking you're an authority on weather because you can predict it and see it from space. But there has not been a great deal of emphasis on the cycles. If you start talking to those who know about the cycles, they'll give you a story. Winter is coming. The cycles on this planet, even without humanity present, have gone from warm to cold, warm to cold, warm to cold. And it is an attribute of sustaining life so it can regenerate. I've said this before. If you are a keeper of fish, if you are one who enjoys the fish tanks of salt water and fresh water and beautiful fish and the things that make it so beautiful, and you have it in your home, you know there is an attribute of the keeping of fish. At some point, you have to change the water. You can't change the water on the earth, but it needs something in order to reboot it, you might say, in your language, to refresh it, you might say, even to have it start again, you might say. Humans don't like that. They don't like to see things disappear or be destroyed, but they always see it recover. And this is the cycle of Gaia that you have not understood at all. Without humans here, the cycles appear, and they have attributes that are data-driven. You can see them. You can study them. One of the attributes is a hot and cold cycle. But the interesting thing about that is in order to have the cold cycle work correctly, there is immediately before it a warming cycle. You're in that warming cycle. Now, those around you who don't want to tell you necessarily about the cycles of the planet will tell you that the planet is going to overheat and you're in trouble, and that is the entire story. They also will tell you that you've caused it. Dear ones, you have caused pollution. That has made this happen, this warming cycle, worse. But I'll tell you something that is extremely controversial, and that is this. You didn't cause the warming cycle in total. It would have happened without you here. Stop polluting this planet. I say that the planet will recover. You may not. Stop polluting this planet. In love with Gaia, you all are. But there's far more for you to know than this. This Gaia, this planet, this beautiful system will recover even if you're not here. So let's stay here, you might say. Think about what you're pumping into the atmosphere to make this worse than it would have been. Controversial? Yes. Some of you will see it, some of you will not, depending upon how long you live, but I am telling you that this will eventually turn into a cold spell. A time of cold on the planet like not before. Not an ice age, a mini ice age, you might say, where it gets colder and colder. Now, why am I, Cryon, wanting to tell you about your weather? How does that fit in with anything that Cryon teaches? And I'll tell you now. It's a common theme. And here is the theme. You are going to need to produce heat in order to survive in your cities, in your homes, in your villages, in a way you have never had to create it before. And in order to do that, you're going to have brand new ways of creating energy for the heat. Ways that will not pollute the earth. Some have called it free energy. It's not free. There's always a push and pull in any physics. But there are some energies that are always there, no matter what you do, for you to use. Gravity, for instance, is one of them. There are rules of gravity. What comes up must come down. Therefore, it is what you would call a neutral energy in that you can't necessarily use it in the way you would like to because it's not that free. Magnetics is another one that seems to be a neutral energy. The pluses and the minuses all equal to zero eventually. And yet, I will tell you, dear ones, that will be the answer. There is a way to use the magnetics in very clever ways in order to get around some of the physics problems that are being seen. And then you will have that which is energy produced with magnetic engines, with motors. Some of them use a piece and a part, perhaps, of battery power, perhaps only to get them started or to push them a little more. And then the magnetics that are creating the energy then will charge up those batteries to do it again and again. There are so many ways that this is going to take place. I have asked my partner to show them to you as they appear on the planet, to show you when someone comes up with wonderful new ways of creating electricity, even in the standard form, but with great savings. This is why you need to know this, because winter will eventually come. Again, there are rolling of eyes. Well, I don't see it yet, Cryon. No, you don't. And that is the point, dear human being. If you had kept records for a few thousand years and you had the data, you'd know it. You'd see it. Oh, here comes another cycle. I invite some of you to start studying the indigenous in cold climates. In this country, the country that my partner lives in, talk to the indigenous of Alaska, for instance, and see what they say in their writings, perhaps, their songs, their wisdom, and the things they've left behind for you to see. They talk about the coming and the going of their glaciers. They recede, they come back. They recede, they come back. The indigenous have seen the cycles. They have written about it. They have songs about it. They have shown it to you. And here you sit wringing your hands that a glacier is receding. I think they would have a good time with that, dear ones. It's time to see that Gaia is larger than you think, and that the cycles it goes through are for you. So you will have subsistence. More than that, you'll have a sustainable food source as long as there's humanity here. Done with the cycles of Gaia. There's more on this for you to see. More science will start to be revealed. But this is the way of it. Prepare for cold. Laugh all you want. There'll come a time when you will say, oh, I think Cryon was right. And so it is.
And after that beautiful message from Cryon, I invite you to open your eyes if you've had your eyes closed. And we're going to move to another part of the program where I am so excited to be meeting tonight's guest. She shares a connection with my sister because my sister was a paramedic for many years, and tonight's guest has developed amazing psychic abilities as a paramedic. Her name is Sarah K. Grace, and I want to make sure Sarah is on the Zoom feed with us. Zoom, are you there? I'm still coming back from my channel. Sarah, are you there?
Hello, I am here.
Oh, wonderful to see you, Sarah. And apologies for calling you Zoom.
Okay. You're forgiven.
You know, these shows are these, whatever happens, happens. You know, psychic paramedic turned holistic first responder, Sarah K. Grace used her psychic abilities while working as a paramedic in the busy California 911 system for 15 years. I ought to just stop right there. That is amazing. And she's got an amazing story, helping countless people through extreme crisis and death. She became an energetic support during people's worst moments.
So Sarah is now a best-selling author, sought-after speaker, and renowned intuitive healer. Specializing in psychic surgery and holistic treatment programs, she can help you pull your life out of the ditch, no matter how severe your current situation. Wow. Sarah, you are in the right place at the right time. Welcome to Healing Wednesday, and tell me all about your journey as a paramedic and then opening your psychic abilities.
Well, thank you guys again for having me. It's really beautiful to be here. And yeah, quite the journey indeed for me. And I just want to honor and acknowledge the power and clarity of both of you in the channel, because I can feel so much energy moving through my system as a result of our connection here. So I'm going to continue to ground myself, and thank you for that. I grew up in South Dakota in the middle of nowhere, pre-internet, on Standing Rock Indian Reservation. And there was no connection to the outside world. One day I just woke up at the age of 7 and I was able to start to see auric fields, is how it started for me. And over the course of a few weeks, the energetics and stimulus became more and more intense for me. So it went from just seeing colors and tracers to feeling sensations, people's intentions. Then I could feel disease or see disease in people's bodies, and it went on to be able to see spirit. And I didn't have any guidance. Unfortunately, it was a very volatile home life situation, and we came from a really conservative background. So when I did make mention, finally, after many weeks of kind of dealing with this on my own as a little kid, unfortunately, I was shamed and condemned and they told me not to talk about it because, it was evil. And so that really was a big foundational time for me, because I developed a fear and I thought, wow, there's something wrong with me, right? And I didn't understand. And that really marked it was a push-pull, love-hate relationship with my abilities from that moment until I really became healed and started utilizing them for good. But eventually, I went through a lot of shadow integration trauma recovery as a result of all of that. And I didn't want anything to do with my abilities at all. But once I eventually became a paramedic, when I had moved to California, the energy just started working through me on these calls. And it was nothing I was trying to do, because I was still really closeted and I didn't want it to be there, especially in such like an alpha type A machismo type environment with like the firefighters and the SWAT guys and stuff. I didn't want to be the weird person who sees dead people, on the calls or whatever. And so I was still very closeted, still very insecure, had a lot of toxic shame around the way that I was and the way that I was, because I didn't understand. But over time, what happened is the energy started coming through me on these calls, and the precognition, and I would know what was going to happen before it did. And I would always know when death was near. And I became the paramedic who was really always there in the moments of death and like the very extreme crises type of calls. And the energy, the awareness,
Amazon. That's literally how I wrote that first book. And I was like within 300 words. So I was like, okay, I think I'm going to turn this into a book. So I got it edited, and that's how I wrote my first book. But I had a book that I had been trying to write for 18 years. And I had written quite a bit. I had written the healing process, or most of the healing process. And I just couldn't finish that book. And I got one piece of history in 2020 that changed everything. And I suddenly realized that's why I couldn't finish that book. I needed that piece of history in order to be able to tell the story in a way that was really healing and transformative for people. So in that book, it's called Cracking the Healer's Code, a prescription for healing racism and finding wholeness. And in that book, I talk about that history that most of us don't learn in school that affects Australians, Africans, North, Central, South Americans, New Zealanders, the Canadians, like it affects all of these people. And we don't know that story. And so I put that story into the book, and that story goes back to the mid 1400s and is still affecting us today, and we have laws that are built on that and so on. So I put that in the book, and then I brought in the process of transformation, with the 13 stages of transformation that you will walk through if you decide to heal from this internalized racial conditioning. And the other thing that I remind people is that whether you're aware of it or not, racism, regardless of the color of your skin, lives in your body. And in that book, there's an exercise for you to find where it lives in your body, what it feels like, and then, moving through the healing process on it.
I'm going to come back to that part where it lives in the body, but in your body of work, I'm aware you have 5 levels of racial conditioning, and I'd love for you to share with us what those 5 levels are.
Yes, yeah. So racism is institutional, systemic, internalized, personal, and interpersonal. So it's institutional, which means that whatever began this has been turned into law, and it's international law. And that law affects everyone and everything, from who gets to have a job to who gets to own land to, your salary. It affects everything. And so it's institutional, it's systemic, because what we do is when we put laws in place, then we put systems in place so to make sure that people follow the law, right? So it's institutional and it's systemic. And because we live under these institutions and we are governed by these systems that are racially entrenched, what happens is that we internalize it. It's not a conscious thing. It's just sort of, it's there, right? So we internalize it. And then it becomes personal. It becomes part of our personality. And then when we act, react, and interact with one another, it comes up, which makes it interpersonal. For the most part, people want to solve racism at the interpersonal perspective. They want you to don't say this, don't say that, be politically correct, and all those kinds of things. And then at the other spectrum, we want to solve it from the institutional perspective, which is putting laws in place. The thing about putting laws in place is that you can't legislate people's hearts. And unless there's a change, not just a change of mind, but a change of heart around this stuff, is very difficult for people to not just change it, but even when they try to make changes, they keep going back to the old self, which is the racialized self, as opposed to being in the purity of their humanity, which is the fact that we are one human family. So it's institutional, systemic, internalized, personal, and interpersonal.
I love that you said we can't change our minds, it's about changing the heart. What are some of the examples that you have witnessed when you've seen a change of heart unfold?
Yeah. So when I was recruited, as I was mentioning earlier, to be the to start this National Resource Center for the Healing of Racism back in 2000, I was doing a seminar, and in the middle of the country, a lot of people, well, maybe some people do know, but there are a lot of militia and KKK and neo-Nazis that live out there. And of course, they work at the companies that I was doing some of this work at. And I was doing some of this work with a particular group. And this young man, and people would say, well, my family, we've been members of the KKK for, like they would, I think sometimes they would say that to threaten me. But what was really interesting was like, I never took it as a threat. I just thought that was part of their history and their story. You know what I mean? So I didn't, I didn't have a reaction to it until years later. I was just like, wait a minute, what was that really about? But because they didn't have to tell me that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But this particular young man, he was 32 years old. And I do a 2-day intensive called Race Demystified. And his company had hired me to do that 2-day intensive. And he was participating in it. And it's so interesting because I used to give people my phone number. Everybody knew where I lived. Like, it never dawned on me that it never occurred to me that I could be in danger, right? It was just sort of like, I'm here doing my spiritual work. And that's really how I looked at it. And so he called me after the second day, and he apologized for all the things that he and some of the people that he was colluding with had done to people of color. And I just thought that was so interesting. But 2 months later, he called me again because the organization had asked me to create a train-the-trainer program for them. And he wanted to be one of the people to come to the training because he wanted to become a facilitator of race work, because he felt that as a white male who had been part of this neo-Nazi training from the time he was 12 years old, he told me, he felt like he had a voice and something to offer, because what he said to me was, I had never heard any of this history. Nobody had ever told me any of this. I didn't know any of this stuff. And, God bless him, his heart melted, because he got information that led to his transformation. And so for me, that's what this work is. It's not about making people bad or wrong. It's about those who are misinformed are bound to miscreate. Because we create from what we know. And if we don't know what we don't know, we're going to create out of ignorance, right? And so, this young man was just like, he was just really transformed. His company didn't bring him in. I did recommend him. They already had a group of people that they wanted trained to do this, which is HR and so on and so forth. But the fact that he thought so much of what he had learned and what he just understood, that he wanted to make a difference. I was so proud of him. And that was only in 2 days.
That's such a beautiful, uplifting story. And it shows you that things can be transformed. Things can be healed. When you talked about racism is held in the body, tell us about how you made that discovery.
Yeah, so I'm so happy to be talking to you guys, because you'll get exactly what I'm talking about when I say this, right? Like, my work comes direct.
Yes.
And so, in how I was really well trained to have that work come direct was by becoming a sound healer before I even knew what that was. Okay. And I got so good at it that I started teaching people how to use their voice to diagnose, how to use their voice to change the frequencies of in people's bodies to help, realign their bodies and so on and so forth. And so I look back on that now because I stopped teaching in 1997. So that shows you how long ago I was into sound healing. But I had trained to be an opera singer when I was a young child. And so I had musical training. And so I discovered that I was that I could hear things that other people couldn't hear. Like even when I heard that voice in the bathroom, right? And could often hear music that other people couldn't hear and things like that. So it was really attuned to frequencies, right? And then I learned about frequencies by doing all the research that I did to become a sound therapist. And so so my work really comes from being still and being quiet and listening. And so I have worked on fine-tuning the listening. And what I was shown at one point was that, first of all, just the recognition that I have a friend who always reminds me that the body makes a chemistry for everything, right? Whether you're happy or you're sad or whatever, body makes a chemistry for it. And what I was shown one night, I think it was in a dream, was that racism lives in our bodies, that we've inherited that dysfunction, and it doesn't matter what color your skin is. Everybody has it, right? So I was shown a very simple exercise, which is, you breathe, you get grounded, you bring your awareness to the center of your chest, and then silently, without saying a word, you just simply say to yourself the word racism. And you say it 3 times. And you notice every time you say it, if your body's having a reaction, what your heart is doing, what your blood pressure is doing. Like you just really, tune into your body and you can feel it. And then you start to find where it lives. And some people find it in their heads, and some people find it in their jaw, and some people find it in their chest, and some people find it in their belly, and some people, people find it in different places. And what I do with people is I remind them that where we store our negative energies, where we tend to get sick, and it's usually where a lineage got sick, which is why when you go to the doctor, they want to know your history, right? And so what I remind people of is that, where we're storing that energy is very often the same place where we store our anger. And also that depending on where in the body that energy is stored, that racism energy is stored, I can tell them all kinds of interesting things about their lineage, right? Like, so for instance, people whose heart, they feel the tightness in their chest, are usually people who have a history of breast cancer, heart disease, lung problems, breathing problems, asthma, and stuff like that. People who find it in their jaw are usually people who have an issue with what's called lockjaw. I can say that my Spanish accent comes through. Lockjaw. They have trouble with their teeth. They often have trouble with their sinuses and stuff like that. So it depends on where you have it stored in your body, but usually where you have it stored is very often when you will get sick, because that's also where you store your anger, where you store your frustration and things like that. So people store it in different parts of their body, but you can actually feel it and your body reacts to it, which is so powerful to realize that regardless of the color of your skin, racism is alive and well in your body.
How does this change our relationship then with our spiritual self?
Well, and how do we release it?
Yeah.
Now that we know we find the area, how do we
go
release?
for the release first because of the time.
Yeah. So one of the things, and again, in the back of the book, I have all of these techniques that people can use. with sound, and also with, just the breath, just using their breath to breathe in and out of wherever they're feeling it, and or to bring the breath in through their heart chakra and have that breath go down into or up into whatever area of the body they're storing this stuff. And those are two of the easiest ways to release that stuff. And of course, if using your own intention around it, like my intention is to release this. And so that helps. But ultimately, it's about releasing ourselves from the contract that we have with the dysfunctional laws.
Yes.
Because again, they're not always aware of the fact that they've agreed to this stuff in one form or another. And so it's awakening to the understanding that we have a collective agreement with something that hurts part of the human family, and that we need to choose differently. As the Course in Miracles says, choose once again.
Beautiful.
Right?
Beautiful. Love the simplicity, breathing, breath work, intention. Intention is the key. Yeah.
So did we get to how this affects our spiritual selves?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you for asking. I don't get asked that enough. So we are, as most of us have learned, right? Spiritual beings having a human experience. Part of our human experience. So when we are in other dimensions, we don't necessarily get to have this beautiful physical body and the vision to see the birds and to hear the roar of the ocean and all of these wonderful things that we get to have as human beings. Part of that is our love for one another. So when it comes to this thing we call racism, this is one of the things that keeps us from our growth. We live in systems that are patriarchal in nature, and a patriarchal system infantilizes people. It needs for you to become an infant and to be an infant for all of your life, so that you never really grow up, because it's easier to control those who are children than it is to control those who are grown up, right? And also because as an adult and as a grown-up human being, you have powers and access to power and access to how you use that power that you may not have as an infant. An infant is dependent, an adult is independent. Okay. And so part of our spiritual journey on this planet is to reunite or remember the human family, bringing all the members of the human family together to be one human family. We are here to learn from one another. We're here to fall in love with each other. We're here to find ways of being peace, so that we vibrate and create that essence of peace that brings about true peace. Human beings aren't here to fight for peace, because fighting and peace do not belong in the same frequency, okay? And so it's about, this is my personal belief, okay? I believe that we are here to love so deeply and so completely that we literally change our flesh. We change it to light.
Beautiful. That is so beautiful. We're almost out of time, so I want to remind people, milagrosphillips.com is the website, and Milagros also does a Lunch and Learn, the race literacy Lunch and Learn. It is the first Monday of every month. It's a fantastic program that you can join if you feel called to do so. Any final words, Milagros, before we have to go to a break?
I want to thank both of you for having me on this program. This has been such an absolute joy. I've been following your work for a long time, so this is
Oh.
great. I'm a little star struck right now, just so you know. And I want to say to your wonderful audience that this is our task, our collective task to heal and to transform. And we have the power to do that. And as one human family, there is nothing we cannot do together. So coming together is the way to get this done. Thank you all so much.